How one dentist's greed accidentally gave the world pain-free surgery, then destroyed him for it. The man on your table is screaming before you even pick up the blade. He's been screaming since you strapped his wrists down. His name is Eben Frost. He has a tooth that needs pulling, and it is a Tuesday morning in Boston in 1846. And you are about to do something that will either make you the most famous man in medicine or land you in a federal prison. You haven't decided which yet. You are William Thomas Green Morton. You are 27 years old. You are a dentist with a half-finished medical degree, a mountain of debt, and an idea so large and so dangerous that you've been keeping it in a glass bottle in your coat pocket for 6 weeks, afraid to use it. The bottle smells like ether. You've been watching what ether does to people at parties. The laughing, the falling, the gap in time between one moment and the next. You've breathed it yourself in your study at 2 in the morning, hand on a pocket watch, measuring how long the gap lasts. 12 minutes, sometimes 14. Long enough? You've tested it on your dog. You've tested it on your dental student. You've tested it on a goldfish in a jar, which is both the most and least scientific thing you've ever done. And now, Eben Frost is on your table, and his tooth is going to come out in the next 30 seconds, whether he stops screaming or not, and you pull the glass bottle from your coat and you say, "Try this first." He breathes. He goes quiet. You pull the tooth. He wakes up 2 minutes later and tells you he felt nothing. Not a twinge, not a whisper of pain. He sits up on your chair and he looks at you like you just did something supernatural. And the thing is, you have. You have just performed the first successful surgical anesthesia in recorded history. The most important 2 minutes in the history of medicine. And your first thought, the very first thing that crosses your mind as Eben Frost blinks back into consciousness and squeezes your hand, is not wonder, is not gratitude, is not the overwhelming weight of what you've just changed. Your first thought is, how do I make sure nobody else can do this? That's the thing about William Morton that nobody likes to say out loud. He wasn't a villain in the way that makes for comfortable stories. He was something smaller and more human. A man who found something genuinely extraordinary and immediately, instinctively tried to own it. To lock it in a box and charge admission. To make the relief of human pain into a product with a patent and a price tag. You call it Letheon. After Lethe, the river of forgetfulness in Greek mythology. You don't tell anyone what's in it. You add a few drops of orange oil to change the smell so it doesn't smell like ether, so nobody can identify it by nose. You apply for a patent on October 1st, 1846. In the patent application, you describe Letheon as a proprietary compound of undisclosed ingredients. This is the medical equivalent of bottling tap water and calling it a miracle. The surgeons at Massachusetts General Hospital want to use it. They've seen what it does. They've heard about Eben Frost's tooth. They want to try it on something bigger, a tumor, a limb, a real surgery with a real incision. And you say yes, gladly, enthusiastically. You will administer it yourself. You will stand at the head of the table with your bottle and your patent application, and you will not tell anyone what is in it. October 16th, 1846. The surgical amphitheater at Mass General. The room they will later call the Ether Dome. Surgeon John Collins Warren is at the table. The patient is Edward Gilbert Abbott, 20 years old, tumor on his neck. The room is full of medical students, faculty, onlookers. Warren has already made a comment to the group, suggesting that Morton might not show up. Morton shows up. Late. You administer the Letheon. Abbott goes under. Warren cuts. The surgery takes 25 minutes. Abbott doesn't flinch, doesn't cry out, doesn't respond to anything. When he wakes up, Warren looks at the audience and says, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." That moment is the pivot. That moment changes surgery forever. From that day forward, the knife stops being the thing patients fear most. The scream that has been the sound of medicine since the first surgical stone is cut. Finally, permanently, to silence. And you are standing there holding a bottle of something you won't name, and you are already calculating the licensing fees. Here's where it falls apart. Here is where it always falls apart with people like this. The medical community identifies what Letheon is within approximately 3 weeks. It is ether. Plain, ordinary sulfuric ether, which has been commercially available for years, which any chemist knows by smell, which the orange oil masked for exactly as long as it took someone competent to analyze it. The patent application is, charitably described, a document about keeping a secret that was never actually a secret. The orange oil was the entire strategy. Surgeons begin using ether freely. Dentists begin using ether freely. Hospitals in Europe begin using ether freely. Word travels faster than Morton's lawyers. By early 1847, James Young Simpson in Edinburgh has already moved on to chloroform. Medicine is running, and it is not looking back at you standing in the starting blocks arguing about who fired the gun. You spend the next 27 years in court. This is not metaphorical. William Morton, the man who administered the first successful surgical anesthesia, who genuinely changed the course of human suffering, who was present at one of the most important moments in medical history, spent the rest of his life in litigation. He sued the government. He sued the military. The U.S. Army used ether extensively during the Mexican-American War. On your discovery, as you understand it. And you believe they owe you compensation. The Mexican War. Then the Civil War, where ether is used on both sides, in field hospitals from Antietam to Vicksburg, on men whose screaming the surgeons no longer have to work through. You are not there. You are in a courtroom in Washington. The Senate debates your claim. They debate it for years. They don't resolve it. Horace Wells, the dentist who first introduced you to laughing gas and who has his own claim to the discovery, has a breakdown, gets addicted to chloroform, throws sulfuric acid on 2 women in the street in New York in a dissociative episode, and dies in prison at 33. Crawford Long, a Georgia doctor who has records suggesting he used ether in surgery 4 years before you, publishes his evidence. He's been using ether quietly in his practice since 1842, telling nobody, which is either modest or incompetent depending on your mood. He wants credit. You want money. Nobody gets either one cleanly. Charles Thomas Jackson, the chemist who claims he suggested ether to you in the first place and therefore deserves recognition, spends decades fighting everyone simultaneously. Jackson will eventually go insane, be committed to an asylum, and die there. The ether controversy, they will call it, with characteristic medical understatement. It eats every person it touches. You die in 1868. You are 48 years old. You are, by any reasonable accounting, broke. Not comfortable, but struggling broke. Actually broke. The kind of broke where your wife has to manage the creditors from the kitchen while you sit in another room with your legal papers, still trying to calculate the value of what you did in that surgical amphitheater 22 years ago. Calculation was always your first instinct, even now. You collapse on a New York street in July of that year. You are buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts, under a stone that reads, "At the suggestion of the Massachusetts Medical Society, who did not pay you a cent. William T.G. Morton, inventor and revealer of anesthetic inhalation, before whom, in all time, surgery was agony. By whom, pain in surgery was averted and annulled, since whom science has control of pain. They gave you the monument you always wanted. They just waited until you couldn't sue them for it. Here is the final irony, and you won't be around to appreciate it. The ether you tried to patent, the compound you dressed in orange oil and gave a Greek name and locked behind lawyers. It will save roughly 10 million lives in the first century of its widespread use. The Civil War alone. Surgeons perform an estimated 80,000 amputations with ether anesthesia. Without it, the mortality rate would be a different number entirely. The suffering that doesn't happen, the screaming that never occurs, the patients who wake up confused instead of broken. You could fill that surgical amphitheater 1,000 times with the weight of what you changed. You found something real. You hid it behind a patent application and a smell of orange oil. And the hiding didn't work, and the real thing escaped anyway. And the world is better for it, and you died in debt with your lawyers. That's not a cautionary tale. It's not a triumph either. It's the specific tragedy of a man who was present at history and tried to charge it admission, and discovered 27 years too late that history doesn't have pockets. Drop a comment. If you were Morton and you knew the ether would be identified in 3 weeks anyway, do you still apply for the patent? Or do you walk out of the ether dome and just let it go?